The October wind cut through Chicago's Gold Coast district when the small figure appeared. Light brown hair pulled into a lopsided ponytail, blue backpack dragging against marble steps, school uniform with a juice stain on the collar. She stood at the edge of the courtyard, eyes wide, terrified, searching. She moved toward him, the man her mother warned her never, ever to approach. The man with tattoos snaking up his neck from beneath expensive tailored suits. The man whose presence made grown men step aside on sidewalks. A mafia boss. Vincenzo Altieri was descending toward his black Maserati when she grabbed his wrist. "Mr. Altieri, sir," she whispered, her voice cracking with fear and determination. "Someone's been following me home from school. Can you please make him stop?" The entire courtyard held its breath. His driver, Silvio's hand moved instinctively toward his concealed weapon. The security detail flanking the entrance went rigid. Even the maintenance worker pressure washing the fountain 40 feet away seemed to freeze mid-motion. No one touched Vincenzo Altieri uninvited. People asked him for deals they'd spend decades honoring, for mercy for transgressions that usually ended in Lake Michigan, but never this. Never protection. Never from a 7-year-old child who should have been invisible in his world. He knelt slowly, his tattooed hands settling on his knees, his voice low and controlled. "Why aren't you safe, Piccola?" The girl, Tessa, hesitated, her small fingers clutching her backpack straps until her knuckles went white. Then she pointed across the street, beyond the estate's iron gates. A man leaned against a gray sedan, hands in his pockets. A smile that felt wrong. A smile that made every protective instinct scream danger. Vincenzo's jaw tightened once, sharp and cold, because he recognized that posture, that calculated stillness. Renato Vescovi's network, a trafficker, a predator who'd been encroaching on the boundaries of his territory. A man who saw children not as human beings, but as commodities to be traded. Tessa's voice broke through again, small but brave. "I just want to walk to school without being scared anymore." Behind them, Renee Whitaker burst from the service entrance, her maid's uniform still being adjusted, absolute terror written across her face. "Tessa." "Oh my God, Mr. Altieri, I'm so sorry." "She knows better. She didn't mean to bother." But Vincenzo raised one hand, cutting her off without shifting his gaze from the little girl, the maid's daughter, 7 years old, standing where she had no right to stand, asking what she had no right to ask. And yet, here she was, choosing courage over invisibility because fear had finally outweighed every social boundary her mother had drilled into her since they'd arrived at this estate. The mafia boss stood up, and what he did next in broad daylight in the courtyard of his own estate in front of his armed security team and the watching predator across the street would shatter every unspoken rule between employer and employee, between the powerful and the powerless, and start a war that would force him to choose between his empire and his soul, between vengeance and redemption. Hi everyone, welcome back. If you're new here, hit subscribe. I post stories like this daily. Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. Now, let's get started. Renee Whitaker had learned the rules of invisibility 2 years ago, the day she buried her husband Marcus in his dress blues with a folded flag that couldn't fill the emptiness he left behind. A Chicago police officer, killed during a routine traffic stop that turned into an execution. 28 years old, suddenly a widow with a 5-year-old daughter and bills that didn't care about grief. The position at the Altieri estate came through Marcus's former partner, good pay, private quarters, no questions asked about the powerful man whose floors she mopped and whose secrets she never acknowledged. She took it because Tessa needed stability, safety, a roof that wouldn't collapse under the weight of their loss. The staff quarters occupied a converted carriage house behind the main estate, modest but clean. 1 bedroom, a kitchenette, windows that overlooked the service entrance instead of the gardens. Every morning, Renee braided Tessa's hair and whispered the same lessons like prayers. Keep your head down. Don't ask questions. Mr. Altieri is not our friend, baby. He's our employer. We stay invisible, we stay safe. Tessa had been so good at it. 7 years old and already fluent in the language of silence, of making herself small enough to disappear into the expensive wallpaper of someone else's world. Until 3 weeks ago. The man in the gray sedan appeared first outside Jefferson Elementary, leaning against the driver's door like he belonged there. Then at the corner market where Renee bought milk. Then across from the estate gates, always watching, always smiling, that smile that made Tessa's small hand grip her mother's tighter. Renee filed the first police report on October 1st. Captain Robert Ellison took notes with the tired patience of someone who'd heard it all before. Has he approached your daughter directly, Mrs. Whitaker? No, but threatened her? Attempted contact. He knows where she goes to school. He's always there. Without evidence of actual criminal behavior, there's nothing we can investigate. She went back 4 more times. For more variations of the same dismissal, the subtext clear in Ellison's eyes. Single mothers see danger everywhere. Working class concerns don't warrant resources. Come back when something actually happens. But this morning, when Senator Baldini's unexpected breakfast visit meant Renee couldn't leave her post, when Tessa stood at their small window watching the gray sedan pull up across the street right on schedule, fear finally burned through every boundary Renee had built to keep them safe. Tessa grabbed her backpack, slipped out before her mother could stop her, and walked straight toward the one man more dangerous than any predator, the one who could actually do something about it. Vincenzo Altieri had been 15 years old when his sister Sophia disappeared from a playground 3 blocks from their house. 8 years old, dark curls and pigtails, wearing a yellow dress their mother had sewn by hand. One moment she was on the swings, the next gone. The police searched for 6 weeks before the case went cold. No body, no ransom, no witnesses willing to talk. Just whispers in the neighborhood about men in vans, about children who vanished into networks that stretched across oceans, about families who learned too late that innocence was currency in markets where human beings were bought and sold. His mother stopped eating. His father started drinking. Within 3 years, both were dead. His mother from a heart that finally gave up searching, his father from a bottle of pills and a note that said only, "I'm sorry, Sophia." Vincenzo inherited grief and rage in equal measure. He built an empire on both, became the thing people feared in the dark, made a vow on his parents' graves that every trafficker who operated in his city would answer to him personally. 20 years of keeping that promise, 20 years of bearing the part of himself that remembered how to feel anything except cold calculation. Until a 7-year-old girl grabbed his wrist and shattered every wall he'd constructed. He looked at Tessa, really looked, and saw Sophia's terror reflected back at him. Then his eyes lifted to the woman rushing across the courtyard, and the world shifted on its axis. Renee Whitaker, the maid who'd worked here for 2 years and had somehow remained invisible until this exact moment. Dark hair coming loose from its bun, fear and fierce protectiveness warring across her face, moving like a lioness toward her cub. Their eyes met for the first time. Truly met, and something Vincenzo thought had died with Sophia stirred back to life. He knelt before Tessa, his voice gentler than it had been in 2 decades. "Why aren't you safe, Piccola?" When she pointed to the gray sedan, to the predator with Vescovi's signature patience, Vincenzo's decision crystallized with absolute clarity. This child would not be Sophia. This mother would not become his own. And Renato Vescovi would learn exactly why some territories were worth going to war over. He stood, meeting Renee's terrified gaze with something that might have been a promise. "I'll walk her. Every day, until this ends." Vincenzo's hand dwarfed Tessa's as they walked down Michigan Avenue, past brownstones where curtains twitched and neighbors suddenly found reasons to be outside. The October morning felt suspended in amber, a mafia boss in a $3,000 suit holding the hand of a 7-year-old in a juice-stained uniform, 6 blocks that might as well have been 6 miles for how impossible this scene should have been. Behind them, Silvio's Maserati crawled at walking pace, headlights off but presence unmistakable. 2 more vehicles flanked parallel streets, invisible to civilians, but clear as daylight to anyone who understood how Vincenzo Altieri moved through the world. The protective detail was there, always there, a shadow army ensuring nothing and no one got close. Tessa's grip tightened as they passed the corner where the gray sedan usually waited. Empty now. The predator had vanished the moment Vincenzo stepped off his estate, proving what Renee's 5 police reports couldn't. These men only hunted where they thought no one was watching. Vincenzo pulled out his phone, never releasing Tessa's hand. Captain Ellison. We need to talk about dismissed police reports and what happens when working mothers don't receive the protection they're owed. A pause. 5 reports in 3 weeks. Renee Whitaker. Yes, I'll hold. His voice carried the kind of cold authority that made police captains reconsider their priorities. The second call went to his intelligence network. Background on every adult male surveilling Jefferson Elementary. I want names, addresses, known associates within 2 hours. Mrs. Kowalski paused while sweeping her stoop, eyes wide. Mr. Calderon stopped mid-conversation with his morning coffee. Parents walking their own children to school slowed, watched, whispered. The impossible was happening in broad daylight. Vincenzo Altieri, protector of a child who should have meant nothing to him. From the estate's 3rd-floor window, Renee watched them disappear around the corner, one hand pressed against the glass. Gratitude and terror warred in her chest because she understood what this meant. Protection came with prices. Debts. Obligations. Men like Vincenzo Altieri didn't help people without reasons that usually ended in chains of a different kind. But when Tessa looked up at him at the school gates and whispered, "Thank you, Mr. Altieri," and he knelt to meet her eyes, his response carried no demand for repayment. In my world, Piccola, strength without mercy is just cruelty wearing a crown. You were brave enough to ask for help. That deserves an answer. When Vincenzo returned to the estate 2 hours later, he found Renee waiting in the courtyard, arms crossed, the fear from this morning replaced by something fiercer. Determination. I need to know what's happening, she said, voice steady despite the way her hands trembled. Every step, every threat. She's my daughter, Mr. Altieri. I don't stay in the dark about this. He studied her, this woman who'd been invisible for 2 years, now demanding to be seen. Something in him recognized the shift, respected it. She wasn't asking for protection anymore. She was demanding partnership. Then you'll need access, he said, pulling a security keycard from his pocket. Main house, security wing, my office. You want to protect her? You work with me, not around me. He held out the card. Their fingers brushed as she took it, and the contact sent electricity through both of them that neither acknowledged aloud. And in private, he added, voice lower, "It's Vincenzo. We're past formalities now, Mrs. Whitaker." "Renee," she corrected, meeting his eyes. "If we're past formalities." By noon, photographs of Vincenzo walking hand in hand with Tessa had circulated through every criminal network in Chicago. Digital copies analyzed in back rooms and warehouses where legitimate business ended and darker enterprises began. The consensus was swift and brutal. Altieri had gone soft. The untouchable boss had found a weakness, and weakness in their world was blood in the water. Renee returned from the afternoon market run to find her quarters transformed. New locks on the doors, commercial grade, the kind used in safe rooms. A security panel installed beside the entrance. The cramped bedroom now held a proper bed with a headboard, the kitchenette outfitted with appliances that actually worked. Medical supplies lined the bathroom cabinet, first aid kit, emergency medications, even an EpiPen she'd mentioned once needing for Tessa's bee allergy. She used her new keycard to enter the main house, finding Vincenzo in the library going through security footage. "I didn't ask for charity," she said, voice sharper than she'd ever used with him. He didn't look up from the monitors. "You asked for safety. This is what that looks like. I ask you to walk my daughter to school." "Not." She gestured helplessly. "Whatever this is. Upgrades I can't afford to repay. Protection that comes with strings I don't understand." Now he did look at her, and the expression in his dark eyes stopped her words mid-breath. "Your husband was Marcus Whitaker, 3rd Precinct. Killed 2 years ago during a traffic stop." "Not a question. You've been alone since then, raising Tessa in quarters meant for storage, filing police reports that get dismissed because your last name doesn't carry weight." Renee's throat tightened. "How do you?" "Because I know what it's like to lose someone you can't protect." His voice carried 20 years of grief. "My sister Sophia, 8 years old. taken by the same kind of predators watching your daughter. The air between them shifted, heavy with shared loss. Renee moved closer, drawn by something she couldn't name. Did you find her?
No.
One word, devastating in its finality. Her hand reached out instinctively, landing on his arm. The contact sparked electricity neither expected, comfort transforming into something far more dangerous. Their eyes locked, and for a heartbeat, the world narrowed to just this. Two people who'd learned to survive alone, suddenly wondering if they had to. Outside, Helen Kowalski knocked on Luis Calderon's door. We need to talk about organizing a neighborhood watch. If Altieri's protecting these kids, we should too. Over the next 4 days, Renee became a fixture in spaces she'd only cleaned before. Vincenzo would explain security protocols. She'd point out blind spots he'd missed, the alley behind the bakery, the broken streetlight near the park. He'd review trafficking patterns. She'd connect from her years watching the neighborhood, remembering faces that didn't belong. They worked in tandem, his resources, her instincts. Coffee at midnight became routine. Shared silences became comfortable. The wall between employer and employee dissolved brick by brick, replaced by something neither had words for yet. By the 5th night, when her hand found his while reviewing maps spread across his desk, neither pulled away. They sat like that for 20 minutes, fingers intertwined, pretending to study surveillance routes while actually studying each other's faces in the dim lamplight. "Renee," he said finally, voice rough. "This, whatever this, is between us." "I know," she whispered. "It's complicated. It's impossible," he corrected. "You work for me. You have a daughter to protect. He gestured at the monitors showing his criminal empire. "This. You're also the man who walks a 7-year-old to school every morning," she said. "The man who upgraded our quarters without asking for anything in return. The man who still grieves his sister 20 years later." Their faces were inches apart now, and the air felt charged with possibility and danger in equal measure. "I don't know what happens next," Vincenzo admitted. "But I know I can't go back to pretending you're invisible." "Good," Renee said. "Because I'm done being invisible." The kidnapping attempt came on day 5, just after school dismissal. 2 men in a panel van pulled up as Tessa walked with a cluster of other children, doors sliding open, hands reaching. But Helen Kowalski stepped directly into their path, grocery bags held like shields. "Excuse me, gentlemen. I think you're lost." Luis Calderon materialized at her shoulder, then Mr. Park from the dry cleaners, then a dozen other neighbors forming a human wall between predators and prey with nothing but their bodies and refusal to look away. The van peeled off, leaving smoking tire marks and a neighborhood that finally understood what protection looked like when everyone participated. By midnight, Renee sat beside Vincenzo in his study, Tessa safely asleep upstairs in the estate's guest wing under armed guard, going through surveillance footage and coordinating security rotations. Coffee had gone cold in their cups hours ago, replaced twice by Silvio, who understood when to disappear. "We should expand the perimeter," Renee said, pointing to the map spread across his desk. "If Vescovi can't get to Tessa directly, he'll try the route between." She stopped, noticing the silver frame half hidden behind case files. A little girl in a yellow dress, dark curls, gap-toothed smile. "Sophia," Vincenzo said quietly, following her gaze. "The day before she was taken. My mother made that dress by hand." Renee picked up the frame with careful reverence. "She looks like she was fearless."
"She was.
"Which is why I should have been watching closer." His voice fractured on the edges. 15 years old, thought I was invincible. Let her play at that playground while I showed off for some girl whose name I can't even remember now. Turned my back for 10 minutes. 10 minutes, and Sophia paid for my arrogance with 20 years I can't give back." Renee set down the frame and took his hand. No hesitation this time, just certainty. "You were a child. It wasn't your fault. Wasn't it?" He looked at her, and the vulnerability in his eyes made her heart crack open. "I had one job. Protect her. And I failed." She stood, drawing him up with her, their faces inches apart. "Then don't fail now. Don't fail, Tessa." Don't fail those other children Vescovi's hunting. Renee. His hand rose to cup her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone, and she tilted toward him, breath catching. The security alert screamed through the moment, shattering it. I won't let what happened to Sophia happen to Tessa, Vincenzo said, already moving toward the monitors. Or to anyone. Not again. The courier arrived at 2:47 p.m. the next day, anonymous in a nondescript uniform, delivering a manila envelope with no return address. Silvio signed for it, instincts already screaming wrong before he'd broken the seal. Inside were 5 photographs. School pictures, the kind parents bought every year and displayed on refrigerators. Except 4 had been marked with violent red X's across smiling children's faces. 7-year-old Andres Vega from St. Augustine Elementary, taken from the playground at 1:15 p.m. 9-year-old Kevin Jong from Riverside Academy, vanished during dismissal at 1:50 p.m. 6-year-old Camila Reyes from Holy Trinity School, last seen in the parking lot at 2:10 p.m. 8-year-old Elena Navarro from Northside Elementary, disappeared walking home at 2:35 p.m. For children, for different schools, for neighborhoods where Vincenzo Altieri had no presence, no influence, no ability to intervene. All taken within 2 hours of yesterday's failed kidnapping attempt. But it was the 5th photograph that made Silvio's blood freeze. Tessa Whitaker, smiling in last year's school picture, light brown hair neat, eyes bright. Someone had drawn crosshairs over her face in red ink. Not an X like the others. A target. A promise. The message on the back was elegant, calculated. You protected one, we took 4.
She's next.
Every hour you delay, one child dies.
Vescovi.
Renee's scream echoed through the estate when she saw the photos spread across Vincenzo's desk. Her knees buckled, hands shaking as she reached for Tessa's defaced picture. Oh God. Oh God, those children. Because of us. Because we asked for help. No. Tessa appeared in the doorway, having heard everything, her young face pale but resolute. She was supposed to be in the garden with security, but somehow she'd slipped past. Because of the bad man who takes children. Not us, Mama. But Renee couldn't hear past the roaring in her ears, the guilt crushing her chest. 4 children taken. 4 families destroyed. Because Vincenzo had protected Tessa. Because she'd asked him to. An hour later, she found Vincenzo in the armory, loading weapons with the mechanical precision of someone preparing to die. What are you doing? Going to get them.
His voice was hollow.
He wants me, not them. I trade myself. The children go free.
No.
She crossed the room in 3 strides, grabbing his arm with surprising strength. Absolutely not. We fight. Together. You don't get to play martyr when 5 children need you alive and thinking clearly, not dead in some warehouse because you're drowning in guilt over Sophia. Their eyes locked, and something shifted. Partnership crystallizing into something unbreakable. Together, she repeated fiercely. We save them all. And then we end Vescovi. Renee, you don't understand what that means. I understand that my daughter is next on his list, she said. I understand that 4 children are terrified right now because a monster wants to prove a point. And I understand that you're the only person with the resources and the rage to stop him. So stop wasting time preparing to die and start figuring out how we all survive this. He stared at her, this widow who'd spent 2 years invisible, now standing in his armory demanding he be better than his worst instincts, and felt something settle in his chest. Not peace. Purpose. Then we make a plan, he said. A real one. Silvio laid out the brutal mathematics of impossible choices on the war room table like a coroner performing an autopsy. Maps marked with red circles, resource allocations, personnel deployments, numbers that didn't lie. We can't do both, boss. His voice was steady, professional, the voice of a man who'd made hard decisions before. We don't have the manpower to fortify the estate and conduct a citywide search for 4 missing children. Vescovi knows this. That's why he did it. Force us to choose. Vincenzo stared at the photographs. Andres Vega, 7 years old. Kevin Jong, 9, with glasses too big for his face. Camila Reyes, 6, with ribbons in her dark hair. Elena Navarro, 8. Serious expression like she was already carrying the weight of her neighborhood's expectations. For children he'd never met. For families who'd never asked him for anything. This smart play is fortress protection around Tessa and Renee, Silvio continued. Triple security, lock down the estate, let the police handle the kidnappings. We keep our promise to the one we can actually protect. My daughter would never forgive us if we didn't try. Renee's voice cut through the room like a blade. She stood beside Vincenzo, hand finding his on the table. And neither would I. We saved them all, or we're no better than the men who took them. Vincenzo looked at her, this woman who'd spent 2 years invisible, now standing beside him like an equal, demanding he be better than the expedient choice. Then we make the resources, he said quietly, squeezing her hand. Within the hour, every operation stopped. Dock workers, construction crews, security teams from legitimate businesses. All personnel redirected to one mission. The empire paused because 5 children's lives mattered more than profit or territory or reputation. Captain Ellison arrived at 6 p.m., no longer dismissive, carrying his own guilt like a stone. My daughter, he said, voice rough. 3 years ago, almost taken from a mall parking lot. I was 10 feet away, looking at my phone. If a stranger hadn't intervened, he met Vincenzo's eyes. I should have listened to Mrs. Whitaker. I'm listening now. What do you need? As Ellison coordinated with Silvio, pooling police resources with Vincenzo's network in an alliance that would never appear in official reports, Vincenzo pulled Renee aside into the hallway. His hand cupped her face with devastating gentleness, thumb brushing her cheekbone. When this is over, he said, voice low and certain, I'm going to ask you something important. And I need you to know, whatever your answer is, I'll respect it. But I'm going to ask. Her breath caught, understanding exactly what he meant. Vincenzo. After, he promised, his forehead resting against hers for one stolen moment. First, we bring them home. All of them. Then we figure out what this is between us. I already know what it is, she whispered.
So do I, he said.
But I want to ask you properly. When there's no crisis, no obligation, no debt. When it's just you and me making a choice. She kissed him then, quick, fierce, a promise wrapped in desperation. Then let's end this. Together. The first tip came at 11:52 p.m. from Helen Kowalski, voice shaking over the phone. I saw the van. Gray panel van, tinted windows, parked behind the old warehouse on Ashland. Same one from the school attempt. I'm sure of it. 20 minutes later, Luis Calderon called with coordinates to a safe house Vescovi's network had used before. His cousin worked demolition and remembered strange activity at an abandoned meatpacking plant near the river. More calls flooded in. A night janitor who'd seen children's shoes outside a loading dock. A delivery driver who'd noticed unusual security at a supposedly empty building. A convenience store clerk who'd sold bulk supplies to men who looked wrong. Too clean for the neighborhood. Too nervous. The same community that had learned to see nothing, hear nothing, say nothing was suddenly finding its voice because one little girl had found hers first. Renee transformed the war room into command central, coordinating civilian intelligence with the precision of someone born to lead. She marked locations on maps, cross-referenced timelines, identified patterns Vincenzo's trained operatives had missed because they didn't know the neighborhood rhythms the way she did. Here, she said at 4 a.m., tapping the meatpacking plant with certainty. All the reports converge within a 3-block radius. The janitor saw lights on the second floor at 3 a.m. Nobody works legitimate hours there. The store clerk said the men bought children's snacks and medicine. This is it. Vincenzo studied her work, the web of connections she'd drawn, the logic she'd built from fragments, and felt something profound settle in his chest. Not just attraction. Not just respect. Something deeper, more permanent. Silvio, he said, never taking his eyes off Renee. We have our location. Mobilize everyone. The raid happened at dawn. Vincenzo's team moving in synchronized silence alongside Captain Ellison's tactical unit. The kind of cooperation that would never appear in official reports but got results when systems moved too slowly and children's lives hung in the balance. The meatpacking plant's basement yielded its secrets quickly. For children huddled in a corner, scared but unharmed. Andres emerged first, then Kevin clutching his broken glasses, Camila and Elena holding hands like they'd promised each other they wouldn't let go. 4 children. All 4 accounted for. Vescovi was found in the office above, packing files and cash, arrogant enough to think he had more time. When he saw Vincenzo, he smiled that predator's smile. You saved 4. How noble. But you can't protect them all, Altieri. There are always more. Captain Ellison's handcuffs cut off the rest. Vincenzo made the call standing in the dawn light, watching paramedics check the children.
Silvio.
Status on Tessa? Safe, boss. Still at the estate with triple security. Helen Kowalski's been reading her stories all night. The girl keeps asking when you're coming back. Only then did Vincenzo allow himself to breathe. When he turned, Renee was there. She'd refused to stay behind, had coordinated from a mobile command unit outside the perimeter. She ran across the gravel lot, and he met her halfway, catching her in his arms. All 4, she whispered against his chest. You got all 4. We got all 4, he corrected. Your intelligence found them, Renee. Your network, your connections. This was you. Over her head, he saw Captain Ellison watching them, understanding dawning on his face about what had shifted between the mafia boss and the widow. But for once, Ellison just nodded and looked away, giving them privacy for a moment that felt like everything changing. Let's go get our daughter, Renee said, and Vincenzo's heart nearly stopped at the word.
Our.
Yeah, he managed. Let's go home. 2 weeks after the raid, the estate's grand hall filled with neighbors who'd never crossed its threshold before. Helen Kowalski sat beside Luis Calderon. Captain Ellison stood with the parents of the rescued children, the Vega family, the Zhangs, the Reyeses, the Navarras. The powerful and the powerless occupied the same space for the first time, boundaries dissolved by shared purpose and shared victory. Renee stood before them all, no longer the invisible maid, but a woman who'd found her voice in the crucible of near tragedy. Tessa sat in the front row between Helen and Silvio, watching her mother with pride that made Renee's voice steady and clear. Fear kept me silent for 2 years, she said. I thought invisibility would keep my daughter safe. But my daughter's courage taught me better. She taught all of us better. One 7-year-old girl changed everything because she refused to accept that some people matter more than others. Vincenzo stood beside her, not behind, not in front, but beside, exactly where he'd been for 2 weeks now, as they announced the Altieri Whitaker Foundation for Child Safety. Their names together, equal partners, symbolizing a union that had transformed them both. From this day forward, Vincenzo said, his voice carrying the weight of a vow, any child in this city is under our protection. Not my protection.
Ours.
Because Renee was right, we saved them all, together. And we build something better than what came before. The applause was genuine, but Tessa wasn't watching the crowd. She was watching Vincenzo's hand find her mother's, their fingers intertwining like it was the most natural thing in the world. 3 days later, Vincenzo walked dozens of children to school, a procession that had become ritual. Parents joined, neighbors joined, even Captain Ellison walked part of the route with his own daughter. The 6 blocks to Jefferson Elementary had transformed into a protected corridor where everyone watched, everyone participated. Vincenzo held Tessa's hand on one side, Renee's on the other, flanked by community members who'd learned that protection was a collective verb, not a solitary noun. Halfway there, Tessa looked up at him, her small face serious in a way that reminded him, achingly, of Sophia. Mr. Altieri? Yes, Piccola? Are you my family now? The question stopped Vincenzo mid-stride. Around them, the procession paused, sensing the weight of the moment. He looked at Renee, saw tears gathering in her eyes, saw her nod. Permission and hope and love all contained in that single gesture. He knelt to Tessa's level, the same way, He had that first impossible morning 6 weeks ago when a terrified little girl had grabbed his wrist and changed everything. Yes, Piccola. If your mama will have me. Tessa's face split into a grin.
She will.
She told me last night she was falling in love with you. She said it's scary but good scary, like the first time on a roller coaster. Renee's face flushed red. Tessa Marie Whitaker, that was a private conversation. But Vincenzo was laughing, standing, pulling Renee to him with one arm while Tessa wrapped around his other side. Good scary, he repeated, looking into Renee's eyes. Yeah, I can work with that. Vincenzo, she started, but he was already kissing her, right there on Michigan Avenue with dozens of witnesses and one very pleased 7-year-old, and Renee's answer came without words, just her hand in his hair, pulling him closer, her lips finding his in a kiss that tasted like tomorrow and second chances, and the courage it took to choose love over fear. When they finally broke apart, the neighborhood was applauding. Helen Kowalski was crying happy tears. Captain Ellison was shaking his head with a reluctant smile, and Tessa was bouncing on her toes, already planning what she'd tell her friends at school. The transformation was complete. The destroyer had become a protector. Isolation had become love. Vengeance had found its purpose in building something better than what came before. And in the place where a widow had once mopped floors in silence and a mafia boss had walked alone through his empire, there was now a family, built not from blood or obligation, but from courage and choice and the radical belief that everyone deserves protection, everyone deserves safety, everyone deserves to be seen. And there you have it, Tessa's courage, Renee's strength, and Vincenzo's transformation from a man who destroyed to one who protects. So here's my question. If you were Renee, could you trust a dangerous man with your daughter's safety? Could you open your heart to someone whose world runs on violence, even if he proved he'd use that violence to keep you safe? Drop your answer in the comments. I genuinely want to know. If this story had you hooked from the moment that 7-year-old grabbed a mafia boss's wrist, hit subscribe. Share it with someone who loves stories about found families and second chances that cost everything but give back more. Another story drops tomorrow, one that'll make you question what you'd sacrifice for the people you love. Thanks for watching. Until next time, remember, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is ask for help from the last person you should trust.